Okay, sorry I had little technical difficulties at the beginning of this, but so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Julie Two Moon, and I am a naturopathic medical doctor, and I have a background. Sorry, I'm going to adjust my camera here so the light hits a little better. I have a background in Chinese medicine as well. I have a master's of Oriental medicine. And my entire focus is on helping exhausted women stop the exhaustion spiral. And this is a huge deal because what I find is that medicine is not oriented on this. This is not where people are putting their attention. And when they do, they keep telling women like, oh, it's your adrenals. Oh, it's your estrogen, progesterone. You know, it's all these things. They have like a million focal points that are not the focal point. And so I have a program called the Thriving Health Program where we focus on the root cause of exhaustion. The root cause is at the cell, and we work then on things like the silent thyroid disorders that keep getting ignored because cell response to thyroid is very different than the thyroid gland responses. We work on those cell responses that are affecting organ responses that are creating the patterns that are actually keeping you stuck. And we do it from every level of the being, the physical, the mental, the emotional, because you cannot work in isolation. There is no pattern that happens in our health that is not part of our life, our mind, our emotions, our mood, everything. And so one of the big problems I see in so many people is that control is really truly sabotaging their outcome. And it's sabotaging it in so many ways. I mean, you guys, I see this in women when I have consults with them to see if I can help them. And they are in a space where it's like they've set up the belief system that they are going to have to figure this out, that it's on them, because that's how they operate in every other aspect of their life, is that it's all on them. No one else can do it. No one else is going to get it right. So I'm going to have to do it. And this is a huge problem because how you do one thing is how you do all things. So I will tell you that when I evaluate women all the time, I find I find cellular patterns. That's what part of the analysis method I use does. But in women, what I find so often is that we find this pattern that is all about their inability and unwillingness to allow for help and nourishment and balance to come into their life. And this happens deep down at a cellular level. Like we're able to see that the cell pattern is like arms stretched out, like you stay over there, I'm going to stay over here. And women, I see it show up in their relationships. You know, that's when they're like, my husband never helps me. Oh, but I never ask. And I never let him do things because he's going to do it wrong. Or I never let anyone else step in and take over or give me a break. I don't let people nourish me. I don't let people like love on me. I keep everyone at an arm's length for a lot of reasons. That, you know, the things that go into that can be trauma. They can be that we got set up as kids with patterns where we were told, like, you better work hard and you better be the one that takes responsibility and you better be the one that gets things done, right? So we set up these patterns and they start to show up in our life. It may show up at work where like you take on every task, you know, like you assume other people's job responsibilities. You take on jobs that are not yours because you don't think anyone else is going to quite do it right. You might as well just do it yourself because after all, then you know it gets done and you know it's going to be done right. So you take over that. And in your health and healing, this often shows up as this persona where you never stop researching. You are a perpetual research machine. You are the person who all of your friends can call to be like, what nutrient affects blah, 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 and what herb do I take for XYZ? But the problem is that you're so consumed with this mental space of really like kind of controlling the information and being on top of like the latest research and what goes here and what goes there, that you'll end up existing in this space where you can't see the forest for the trees. Like your mindset is, I got to be on top of it. I got to be dominating it. I have to be ahead of it. And what's happening is that it's that same atmosphere that's establishing the cell patterns in your body that are blocking all these hormonal responses. They're blocking energy production. And let me explain how that happens. So it blocks energy production because when we go into that braced mode, you know, it's like I'm so much in my head. I'm relying on this, my intellectual prowess and my physical stamina to get anything done in my life. So I get into that space, and literally your cells, they brace too. So what you're doing in your life is happening down at your cells. So your cells start to brace. What happens then? Well, cells that are bracing are like, ooh, I don't know if I can let anybody in. That means I don't know if I can let nutrients into the cell. I don't know if I can let glucose or protein or fats into the cell. I don't know that I can let minerals into the cell. And that starts to happen. Now, on top of that, the tissues around your cells hear that broadcast and they're like, oh my God, we don't know if, like, we have to be on top of it. No one else is going to take care of this. And look at that energy. Like, even look at my body language. Like, it's like, oh. So what happens is the tissues go on lockdown. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have issues with oxygen perfusion and carbon dioxide perfusion. This tissue issue is also going to create obstacles. What most of us don't realize is, like, when we take a nutrient, many times that nutrient literally has to traverse an equivalent distance to you having to walk from LA to New York to get your job done. So I want you to think about, if we've established this pattern of sort of like braced rigidity where we assume responsibility for everything, where we are like, no one can help me, I have to do this on my own, which is what I hear all the time, that what happens is now it's like what could have been like this smooth, well-greased track, right? All the way for that nutrient to go that veritable distance, LA to New York. And all of a sudden it's like encountering roadblocks. It's finding, unnavigable paths. It's having to do workarounds. It's having to take a detour. Maybe it never even reaches there because it literally gets stuck. You get stuck in the mud. And that's what happens. That on top of the fact that the cell response becomes this like braced rigidity. I don't know that it's safe to let anyone in because I'm not sure they'll do it right? Because we have that mantra, and I hear this, the women in my program, when we discover this pattern and I describe this mode of operation, they are always like, how did you know that about me? Like, how did you know that that's the space I operate from? And it's like, your cells are saying it. Your cells are literally saying that your mantra, your like perception of life is, I'm going to have to do that because no one else is going to do it right. They're not going to do it soon enough. They're not going to be on top of it. They're going to forget. So I have to. Now, and so what happens is your cells get this sort of like rigid persona, and it literally impacts all of these things that we're talking about. Now, so when they adopt that pattern, what happens is it starts to rapidly shut down thyroid communication at the cell, because that thyroid communication is actually like a level of softness and a level of kind of like allowing. That's part of the nature of thyroid response at the cell. It's like, I'm going to let you in. I'm going to let you do your job. I'm going to assume your brilliance, and I'm going to let myself be loved. I'm going to let myself warm up. Think about what happens when we have thyroid disorders. Like, people often, not everyone, people often experience cold hands, cold feet, cold nose, cold body in general. And think about that. That's that shutdown. That's that like clenching, contracting. What happens in the cold? We contract. In Chinese medicine, we talk about this cold, and we talk about how it shows up as this yang deficiency. And like literally from that Chinese medicine perspective, the tissues start to contract. The tissues start to freeze out. And then what happens to the spaces around your cells, you guys, they literally do become impenetrable. They become like a frozen stream. There's nothing really moving there. So this is part of that mindset. This is part of that mantra that happens when we operate from this place. And that's that place of control. So then your thyroid responses can't happen, which means you don't get warmed up. You don't get that beautiful yang qi. You don't get that flow and that ease. So then the cells have to keep going into survival mode, like one layer deeper. And survival mode has all that contraction to it. It has all that bracing. It has all that like, oh, I got to get ready for the next shoe to drop, the next thing to happen, or I got to be on top of the next 5 things, or maybe I got to go research. I can't tell you the number of times I speak to women who have 4 or 5 autoimmune diseases. They they have shortness of breath, they cannot digest, they're not sleeping, they actually have diagnosed issues with organs beginning to shut down. And they are like, well, I research about 2 hours a day on my health. And the thing is that it becomes a compulsion. It becomes like this I am going to like land on it. I'm going to land on it. It becomes this thing where we start to not be able to discern, because we're doing it from the middle of the storm. Like our mind can't operate from a different place that our cells are operating from. So if your cells are exhausted, or if you're not getting thyroid perfusion at your cells, like you're not going to get that spark at the mind. If you don't have yang qi, you're not going to get that beautiful fire of inspiration at the mind. If you're not letting people in and your cells are in that holding place, then your mind is going to be like narrow, like your vision is going to be narrow. You can only see what's in that purview. So what happens is we try to solve a problem from the same mindset that is actually creating the problem, and we're only going to see things that fit into that box. And so what happens is, like, a woman I spoke to this weekend, like, well, I'm taking chlorella because I know I don't detox. Right. But meanwhile, there's 4 autoimmune diseases and your kidneys are in shutdown. So chlorella is too aggravating. It's cold. It's bitter. It's going to shut down that spleen energy. And so you're not going to be able to do the alchemy and take what you eat and turn it into chi. You're not going to be able to create that heat that generates that vitality. So what's going to happen then is that is the antithesis of what you need. But in that sort of steel trap model of the mind, where we're in that drive mode, we think, I am so on top of it because chlorella, helps trap heavy metals and it does all this stuff. But for you, that is not a good match, because you're trying to control one aspect of a global problem. The reason why we don't detox is because our cells are stuck in survival mode and we can't make the energy to run the detox pathways. And our body is smart as all heck and knows that. And so it's not detoxing. It's storing that stuff for later, for when there's energy to run the detox pathways and when there's accessible nutrients that aren't stuck somewhere, between LA and New York, not able to get to their intended destination. And it knows that. So it's not detoxing because it's forgotten or it's faulty or it's failing you. It's not detoxing because none of those pathways are open and it knows it is a really dangerous proposition to proceed any further. So this is what we miss when we're operating in that space. Now, another aspect of this, and I love this when it comes up in healing, because when I'm working with women, a lot of times once we've opened up cell energy path, we're starting to get the energy going. We're like starting to get movement in their body. We're starting to get their spark back. They're starting to feel inspired. And then, we come to the place where it's like, we hit that emotional place where it's like, oh, I got to start to let people in. I got to start to let them come and help me. And I'm going to tell you guys a funny story, because when at one point in my healing, someone had said to me, and my husband was sitting next to me, and this practitioner said, what's interesting is that I can see in all your patterns that you don't let people love you. And I start laughing, like, are you kidding me? I, of course, let people love me. My gosh, blah, blah, blah. My husband just starts laughing. He starts laughing and he looks at me and he says, wow, she nailed it. And I was sitting there shocked, like, what are you talking about? She nailed it. But here's the thing. I was running myself ragged. I was operating from that place, like, I'm running a practice, so I got to get that done. I got to take care of the patients. I got to make sure the paperwork's done. I got to make sure messages are returned. I got to make sure people are taken care of. I got to make sure they got their stuff. I got to make sure they feel heard at home. I got to make sure the dinner got made, the groceries got bought. I got to make sure, like, I'd taken it all and I'd put it all on my list. And I wouldn't let anyone else have a piece of the list. Like, I was like, no, because I'm the best person for that job. You can't help me. I remember saying that. Like, my husband would ask, can I help you? And I'd be like, no, I'm sorry. None of this is stuff that you can do. It's stuff that only I can do. And that wasn't true. It's just that I was so in survival mode that I kept grabbing things and putting them on my own plate, including my own health, and saying, like, no. I'm the only one who can do that. And what was happening is that my cells were shutting down. They weren't taking in nutrients. They weren't accessible to glucose. My poor spleen, you guys, the spleen. So the spleen in Chinese medicine is this organ of alchemy. So it takes what you eat and it grabs the life force out of it and it sends that life force up to the lungs, and then the lungs distribute it to the rest of the body. So if your spleen is weak, which we've talked about this before, but I'll go into it again. If your spleen is weak because we sit and think too much, because it hasn't had access to the kind of foods that are going to build your spleen, because you are constantly trying to control an outcome, because you're constantly in drive, go, go, go mode, which is more liver energy. If you've been operating that way, and especially if you've been eating like cold foods like ice water and ice cream and, all these things, what happens is the spleen starts to get weak. Well, the spleen is also synonymous as the mother. So the nourisher, like the one who can like absorb and like take care of. So as the spleen gets weak, guess what? The spleen controls those tissues. It's got the job of managing the health and vitality of the tissues, aka the space between, Los Angeles and New York in your body that each of those nutrients has to traverse. So the weaker the spleen gets, it can be prone to dampness, which is like a boggy heaviness. Maybe you start to see it's like, oh, now I'm like puffy. Now I'm having swelling. Now I hurt to the touch, like my muscles hurt to the touch, like that's starting to happen. The spleen is also responsible for this energy generation. So as you find yourself getting tired, your brain gets foggy, that can be part of that damp pattern as well, like that dampness, that heaviness, that foggy, I'm trying to think through cotton kind of sensation. As those things build, you can have headaches because it's like that heaviness is settling in there. Your muscles can ache, your joints can ache. You can find you're weak, like where you used to feel strong and vital, like you feel weak and like unable to do things. Your digestion is going to suffer under that spleen too. It's like, oh, I'm always bloated, or I'm constipated, or I'm gassy. Or if that dampness gets really bad, it's like, oh, I'm having, loose stool and all this pain and cramping and congestion. That's all part of that. Well, that's what happens. Like that state I was describing that I was functioning from, right? There's no access to nourishment there. It is all drive. And the liver controls that drive. So the liver is the let's get things done part of us. I love the liver, right? Because the liver is what makes sure that we can hatch a plan. We can enact our passions. We can, set a goal and accomplish it. But when we're all liver and metal, a little bit of that lung energy of kind of that rigidity of metal, when we go into that space, it is all push. It's all drive. It's just like banging away. Think of like, it's like a general with the army, like we're going to bust through that wall. Like there's that general doesn't think, oh, my troops, they really need rest. They probably need some hot meals. They need to lay in the sun. Maybe they need to laugh. Like that's not the mindset of the general. The general's like, we have a target. We need to get on that target and make it happen. Right. So that's that liver energy. So that's like where I was living. That's where I see all these women living, in that liver space of drive harder, get through that list, add one more thing to the list. You can do it. Come on. What are you, weak? I hear women say that all the time, like that they've lived in this space of it's a failure if they're not on top of it. It's a failure if they're not driving hard. It's a failure if they're not able to solve the problem on their own. And the truth is like, if you've been listening to me, hopefully you start to see like, oh my gosh, this is how I think. It's what's the state of my tissues? What's my spleen doing? What's my liver doing? What are my lungs doing? How am I processing emotions? Are the nutrients stuck somewhere? Is my body at this super low energy space where it has no idea how to cultivate that? What's my cell response to thyroid? Like these are all the things that happen when we keep trying to control. I need to control the outcome. I need to control today. I need to control my actions, other people's actions, my body. Because that's another place we go. When we get deeper into that pit, what starts to happen is that there's like a shift where it's like, I need to control this body. It's not behaving the way that I think it should behave. So I'm going to enact control. as women, we tend to do that a couple different ways. I mean, the most common is, that's it. I'm going on a diet. I'm going to cut out all the quote unquote bad foods. I'm going to eat salad. That, I'm done with this. I am going to make this happen. Now, maybe there's one of you that has never said that to yourself, but very many of you have. I know you have, because I've been working with women for so long. And what happens is, like, that model of control has a bound to fail sticker attached to it. You may be able to force an outcome for a period of time, but you are going to eventually butt up against the fact that you created that outcome by sacrificing something else in the body. It's like the general who takes all the town's food reserves to power the army, not caring or remembering that everyone in that town is now going to go hungry. That's kind of how it goes when we start enacting plans like that. And so we are not paying attention to the fact that the cell response to thyroid just dropped into the pit even further. We're not paying attention to the fact that that rigidity has meant that the cells can't even use nutrients the way that they're supposed to. We're not paying attention to any of those. We're just focused on one outcome. That's that control model. We do it with other means too. We try to control pain, control how our body functions, control our strength. Years ago, you guys, I was an avid CrossFitter, only to find out that I hadn't cultivated any functional strength. I just could lift heavy things up over and over and over. But when it came to like functional strength, like moving my body in certain ways that were foundational to human movement, I didn't have that. You want to know why? Is because I was controlling one outcome, one method of motion within those tissues, and the tissues had no capacity to do dynamic creative movement, and so I was stuck in that space. This is what I mean by, like, we can enact control for a while, but eventually that failed for me. I became chronically injured in that sport, and it just took me down. And the reason is that, again, it was that model of control. I was trying to control an outcome and create one response, and not paying attention to what are all the factors that are part of this, and where do I need help. And so we have to build that spleen as one of the foundational things. So you're going to have to think about that spleen. Now, the spleen, the basics, and there's nuances here for everyone, but the basics are, nothing cold, and ideally nothing raw. You really, especially if you live in a colder climate and your spleen is really weak, you're not going to build yourself with raw foods, but you can definitely build yourself with gently cooked vegetables. Soups are wonderful. Well-cooked grains or root vegetables or squashes or sweet potato or something like that. Don't lean heavy on the things that are going to be greasy and kind of sticky. So not all this extra fat, not, heavy bacon and lots of heavy dairy and things like that. Dairy can be a lovely food for the spleen, but, just not consuming like all this heavy cream, heavy dairy. You also are going to need to start to let people in. So sometimes it's as simple as starting to ask the question, where can I begin to ask for help? And then accepting that help and allowing the help that you receive to be what it is, not needing to control that. So if it's help at home and it's saying to someone, hey, I really need you to put away that load of laundry, not harping on them because it didn't get done right now. Or maybe they put the stuff away differently than you would have. Maybe the sheets were folded differently than you would have folded them, or the towels. And instead of getting caught up on that, see, they don't do it like I want it done, being able to accept the gratitude of, oh my God, isn't that so great? And I love that that person has a different way of doing this and it still got done, and starting to soften into that acceptance. This is huge. That will start to soften your tissues. That will start to let the liver have a break. You guys, also for women, when we think about like the serious diseases of aging, like diabetes, which is not letting sugar into our cells, and heart disease, which is the hardening of the heart, like a broken heart from not letting people in. Think about that. Or maybe in your health, it's saying, you know what? I think it's time I surrendered this to someone who does have the knowledge, because I've been giving myself the responsibility for solving a problem that is not in my primary knowledge base. And as much as I might go read and research ad nauseum, the truth is that I can't see the forest for the trees because I'm sitting in the middle of the pit and all I see are the walls of the pit, and I'm just grasping at emergency measures over and over and over and over. So maybe it's finally going, you know what, I surrender that. I surrender it, and I'm asking for help. I'm asking for guidance. I'm asking for wisdom so that I can actually learn how to partner with this body before it's too late. And I say that because I've been touched recently by some people that I've interacted with where it became too late because they wanted to control the outcome. They wanted to control it to the point that it became something unsolvable. I got reached out to by a woman who wanted to control the outcome, so went on to continue to try to do it herself. She had a major heart attack. You know, another woman who had a major stroke, another one who had a mental breakdown. I mean, it happens. Like, we get so caught up in this has to be on my shoulders and I'm not yet ready to accept help. And then we get to the point where we're stuck for good. And that's that consequence of staying here and just enacting, you know, that rigidity over and over and over. So surrendering is a huge part of it. That's surrender to self too. It's like willingness to say with all that love to this beautiful divine body, because you guys, you have no idea the magic that is your physical body. I mean, it defies, you know, we all look up at the stars, right? And we're just in marvel of stars, or you go see giant sequoias and you're like, oh my God. Or maybe you stand at the edge of the ocean and you just think, whoa. But that's the same kind of reverence that we should have when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we look at our beautiful body and we just, I mean, start to marvel at it just for a moment. I want you to think about like your eyes, like the vision. It's like a miracle. I mean, you have eyeballs and it's creating images out of reflected light so that you can have the experience of seeing that ocean or that sequoia or your kids or a bird. I want you to think about, you've never told your skin to heal, but when you cut yourself while you're cutting up vegetables in the kitchen, it does it automatically. You've never sat down and consciously said to your heart, okay, I want you to beat X number of times a minute, and it does it automatically. Most of us have never even thought about our kidneys, right? I mean, unless we've had pain in them, it's like a non sequitur. And here, your kidneys have been literally discerning what needs to stay and what needs to go your whole life. And you've never once had to intervene. That's how magical. I mean, talk about mind-blowing level magic. That's what your body is. And so I want you to tap into the reverence of that because it's essential. Because when you start to tap into the reverence of that, it's very hard to turn around and say, I bet I just need to diet. I bet I just need to do more high intensity exercise. I bet I just need to shove a bunch more random supplements in my mouth. Because it's those things then start to stand in contrast to, wait a minute, if this is this divine structure, how can I partner with it? Where have I been setting up roadblocks? Where have I been, inadvertently standing in my own way or blocking the beauty that could be manifesting, like generating within me? And wow, despite the fact that maybe I haven't always been showing up and partnering, oh my God, my body keeps trying to keep me alive. So isn't it time that I finally reciprocated that relationship? Because that's the truth. Every single symptom that we're experiencing along the way, by our, pushing, by not knowing how to feed ourselves, by just being so stuck in the various ways that we get stuck in life, we've generated that our body just keeps doing what we ask it to do. It's like, oh, you need to push some more? Okay, here we go. Even if the energy resources aren't easy to find, even if they're not easy to access, it'll keep pushing. So in many ways, the way that I learned to understand this was, holy moly, I've been asking my body to function a certain way. I've been asking for a certain outcome, and it keeps giving me exactly what I asked for because I don't realize how much I'm impacting function. I don't realize how much I'm setting the stage. And that's part of that surrender. Ooh, okay, I'm ready to surrender to what would that partnership look like and feel like, and how am I going to take part in that? And what do I need to get there? So do I need guidance? Do I need someone to help me understand what my body's been doing? Do I need to work with my food? Do I need to work with my emotions? Do I need to work with my mind? Do I need to approach movement differently? Like whatever it is, and it's probably all of those. But it's that. And those are the opposite of trying to control to an outcome. So I'd love for you to just explore for yourself. Is control setting the stage for failure in your healing journey? Are you so consumed with never, ever, 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 ever losing control that you're just making bigger and bigger roadblocks everywhere along the way? And is that serving you? I mean, are you happy with the outcome that that's producing? Have you given yourself responsibility for trying to solve a problem that you actually don't even have the perspective to solve? And if so, like, what would it be to change that? And imagine it. What would it be like? Really ask in wonder. I love wonder questions. So what would it be like to allow yourself to be taken care of? What would it be like to become the one that takes care of, even with your body? To step out of that relationship of demand and step into one where you're the loving adult in your life. Not taking on more responsibility, but literally being the loving adult in your life, to you, to your cells, to your organs. What would that be like? And what I want to inspire, as you ask this question, I want you to know something, that as you invite that relationship of softness and love and abundance in the relationship you have with your cells, you will discover softness and love and abundance find you in your life in other ways. It will seek you out. And so, lest you think, well, if I do that, I'll never get anything done, the opposite becomes true. That the more we invite it in, suddenly there are people in our life asking, can I help? What can I do? Suddenly there's abundance in other places, in our finances, in our passions, in how our life gets organized. It will show up. But really, I invite you to explore those questions with wonder, and just let it percolate. There's no right or wrong answer, but could you let that percolate and start to imagine, what would it really feel like? What would the sensations be? What do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself standing or sitting or lying? What do you see the experience showing up as? What does it feel like on your skin? Is the sun shining? Is it raining? Are you in a warm room, a cold room? Where are you? And start to tangibly connect to that outcome. And if you find yourself ready to surrender, like ready to actually lovingly surrender to your biggest vitality, your biggest healing, your biggest expression of self, what I invite you to do is certainly send a message to me. Let's see what the next steps look like for you. But it's time to let control go. It's time to let yourself experience what it is to be alive. Because to me, that's what health is. It's not the absence of pain. It's not energy. It's not great sleep. It's the level of aliveness you are experiencing at every level of your being in each and every moment. That's what it means to heal. And so that's what waits for you, is feeling truly alive and grounded and peaceful and connected and prosperous and abundant and tingly and sexy and passionate and creative. Like, that's what happens. But you don't get there by trying to control the outcome, because it won't happen. That control creates rigidity, which creates patterns that just keep anything from coming in. I appreciate you all so much for being here, for listening, for exploring even just some of the concepts as we talk. And I invite you to reach out to me. This is what healing is to me. To me, it's a sacred journey of really kind of connecting back to the beauty and bounty and truth that is held deeply within us, that we can reactivate at any time once we start getting out of our way. And so if that's you, send me a message or comment below. But it is possible for every single one of you watching, and you're worth it is the other thing. You are worth it. Blessings.